So we've been getting a lot of requests for this video. We just did the video of the 13 hours of St. Britain. And a lot of comments was like, guys, you need to watch the video, know your ally. And basically, I didn't know what it was. Did you know what it was?
No, I had no clue.
So basically, during World War II, before our troops went over to England, I guess they gave this to they showed this video to our troops to kind of get them familiar with the Brits and the British ways.
Yeah.
Which I understand. We needed a little heads up. We didn't get a heads up. And to be totally fair with you guys are rascals.
Yeah.
You're rascals. So we need a little heads up for you guys. And I thought it'd be cool, real quick, kind of talk about, because when we went to England for the first time, that was the first time we ever left the country.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be cool, while we're talking about this, and while we're watching this, some of our misconceptions that we had about England that was later like, that was crazy. I don't know why we thought about that.
Yeah.
So if that sounds fun to you, hit the like button. This is a copyright-free video, so we're watching it. Buckle up, and let's see what 1930, 40 America thought Britain was and what we needed to be prepared for culturally. Let's do it. Here is Know Your Ally. Yeah, let's start off with football. There was no pads. That was like concussion city back then. That was literally just a leather helmet.
Mm-hmm.
That game wasn't won by the man who made that touchdown. It was won by a team, and every man on the team had a share in winning it. We're playing another kind of a game.
I know this is completely off topic, but see. There's that, right?
It was won by a team.
See those things? That's called a sled. And I used to play football all through high school. That was the most miserable thing on the planet because that was the last thing you did during practice. Mm-hmm. And they would push it. Like, you don't know how many times I would push that. And literally they would stop you when you threw up. Like, it was brutal.
That's rough.
And every man on the team had a share in winning it.
So what's the point?
We're playing another kind of a game now, only this one isn't for fun. It's for keeps. And this game won't be won by any single player either. It'll be won by a team called the United Nations. The ball will be carried by the men in the backfield. The tough little guy from China, Big Joe Russia, John Britain, and a guy called Yank, the four greatest backs in the world.
How awesome is it for its time? Big Joe Russia?
Yeah.
I gotta hear that again.
Field. The tough little guy from China.
Tough little guy. That was kind of offensive.
John Britain,
funny, though.
and a guy called Yank, the four greatest backs in the world. So let's take a look at the men who carry the ball with us. Who are they? How do they live? What makes them tick? Let's start with the one that's toughest to understand. The one we know just enough about to confuse us. John Britain.
John Britain.
Here's where he lives. A little island no larger than the state of Idaho. 500,000 people live in Idaho. 96 times that many live in Britain. The Nazis and the Japs scream about Lebensraum, living space. But there are more people on a square mile of Britain than a square mile of Germany or Italy or Japan. More congestion than practically any place on Earth except the New York subway or a sardine can. And that's a clue that explains a lot about John Britain. We build front porches on our houses because we didn't want to miss the chance to see our neighbors. But John Britain hides himself in a little box and plants a hedge around that to make sure he doesn't. Living that close to neighbors, privacy is part of the pursuit of happiness.
John Britain don't want to be bothered.
And in the sardine can called Britain, they learn to get on with their neighbors. They have to. He's too damn close. That's why they have so little crime in Britain. Believe it or not, even in wartime, the British cop does not carry a gun,
Wow.
nor does the professional crook. And in 1926, when the world heard of this stoppage of work in Britain, that industry, transportation, the whole life of the country had been paralyzed by a general strike, it was still more surprising.
I gotta stop. First of all, like, we just pretend that the English countryside does not exist. John Britain is London. What every subscriber hates about every channel
Yeah.
or any American that goes to England, we're just going to describe John Britain. There's just London. John Britain has no personal space. John Britain had to put up hedges because his damn nosy neighbors. That's what John Britain had
I'm
to do.
John Britain.
Yeah, you can tell the English blood runs. Our dream home consists of very large walls around it, so nobody can see what we're doing. And you'd swear we was doing something. We're doing nothing. We just don't want nobody to see it.
Yeah.
And now we know that's the British in me, because apparently my great grandfather was John Britain.
Next day to learn that the strikers were playing football with the cops. You can only understand that if you live in a sardine can.
Why does he keep calling
The
us
second clue to this guy on our team. No part of Britain is more than 100 miles from the sea. Every day for hundreds of years, years of peace and years of war, John Britain has seen ships sail from his island to the seven seas. That means that whenever John Britain wants to bust out of his sardine can, it's the sea that gets
Stop calling it a sardine
him.
can.
He's been busting
The
out for hundreds
only
of years.
escape you people have is the sea. Y'all sailors. That's the only escape that you have from that sardine can. I wish I would have watched this before, because we could have a sardine can counter. How many times this man's referred to this country as a sardine can?
And we're only 4.5 minutes in.
There's 42 minutes. Thank you for joining us. So 42 minutes of just slightly throwing shade to your country and calling it a sardine can. Welcome, welcome.
And that led to Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Canada, and for that matter, the United States of America.
And for that matter, because it was a sardine can.
How
That's the
did
only
John
reason them
Britain get
countries
on?
are there.
Remember 1938? The Yankees won the pennant. Wrong way, Corrigan. The last trains ran on the 6th Avenue L. Well, John Britain got excited about the same sort of things. The bet he had on the Derby, or, as he would say, the Derby.
The
His
Derby.
job.
I
His
love
cute.
that.
The
Getting
Derby.
his exercise on his day off. Preston North End taking the football cup.
Oh, I'm
Only
taking
300
sardine
miles
cans. Though.
away, people were cheering another kind of event. And in London and every other British city and town, they read about what was going on in Europe, and they got sore about it. But they were also pretty well determined to keep it none of their business.
They got sore about it.
Then, this looked bad. The Czechs had a mutual assistance pact with France, and France had one with Britain. This might mean war, even though everyone was anxious to avoid it. They'd been through one war, perhaps been wounded. Hundreds of thousands of their brothers and friends had been killed. There was nothing beautiful to them about war, and they had no desire for another.
In a last desperate effort to preserve peace, the Prime Minister today flew to Munich.
All was well. Britain, France, Italy, and Germany were signing a pact at Munich. A pact in which the Germans agreed they had no further territorial claims to make. It was to be peace in our time. But it turned out to be a strange sort of peace. Hitler's first move was to break the pact he had signed. Wishful thinking was ended. Now they knew something had to be done about Germany.
They approved the Conscription Act, the first peacetime conscription in British history, just as the Selective Service Act was the first in American history. The British had put their cards on the table. They had, in effect, said to Hitler,
"That's enough. If you go into Poland, we'll fight."
Hitler smiled. Like other would-be conquerors of Britain, Philip of Spain, Napoleon, Kaiser Wilhelm, he thought he understood the British. He didn't.
I want to take a second to see how this is actually made, and kind of how the guy's talking and referencing sports, and even some of the things that he says, like sore and all this. These was just slang terms back then, because you kind of get the feeling of who the audience was that was watching this. This was 17, 18, 19-year-old kids. Because they're keeping it very, for the time, pop culture. Pop culture. Really, the Yankees was winning this game, and look what they do. It's football, but it's similar to us. It's not a kid's show. But you can kind of tell they was talking to kids, which is a little eerie, you know?
The sleeping lion began to wake up. He was a pretty drowsy lion for the first 6 months of the war. He snapped and growled. But he dropped more leaflets than bombs. He hoped that common sense would return to the German people, and that they would throw out Hitler and the German warlords. Instead,
at dawn this morning, the German armies, without warning, invaded the neutral countries of Luxembourg, Holland, and Belgium.
The King of the Belgians today surrendered his armies of more than 500,000 men.
Marshal Pétain, as French chief of state, has asked for an armistice. The issue in France is ended.
Britain was alone. Czechoslovakia occupied, Poland defeated, Denmark gone, Norway gone, Holland, Belgium, France gone. Only Britain now. Britain was alone. Hitler considered the war over. Everybody considered the war over, except the British. At the 11th hour, the lion was finally aroused.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on beaches, landing grounds, in fields, in streets, and on the hills. We shall never surrender.
For a year, they took everything that the Nazis could throw at them. For one solid year, from June 1940 to June of 1941, they were the only major power fighting the greatest war machine in the world.
Okay, I got a question, because that just said that they was the only major power fighting the only. Were they not acknowledging the Soviets, or did they not acknowledge the Soviets as a, did we not acknowledge them as a major power? Because wasn't the Soviets fighting the other side?
I don't know.
Or was this trying to paint a picture that they was truly helpless and only could be helped by America?
They took body blow after body blow. Solid punches before they even had their guard up. All they did was take it on the chin and hang on to the ropes. They never went down.
Stoicism. They need to mention Stoicism.
And while they buried their dead, they prepared grimly and defiantly for the day when they could strike back. There were no victories to cheer them on, just defeat after defeat. Some heroic, like the beaches of Dunkirk, or like the hills of Greece,
where British soldiers landed to keep their pledge of honor to the Greek people. Landed knowing they were facing overwhelming odds, but some less glorious. Hong Kong and Singapore and Burma. But through all these long months, the British people were thinking and planning and working only for the day when they themselves could take the offensive. And that day came.
Or is that actual footage?
Kind of looked like it.
It was the British that made the Germans realize that war could be brought to German soil, too. Day after day, night after night.
It's all the places they bombed.
Wow.
The offensive continues in greater and greater strength. That's in the air. And on the ground, 1,500 miles away in North Africa.
I will give this a once it starts talking about war and actually what the British have been through and fought back. I think if I was a troop sitting there, like getting ready to go over, like I would feel comfortable with the idea that the people that I'm going over there to fight with are hard.
Yeah.
Like you realize that you are not, like from this point in the video, that you're not on a charity mission. You got some hard people over there that you're going to be hard with.
You're coming to be alongside.
You're joining a fight, and it really is not painting itself right now as like, I mean, there's still some time in here, but it's not painting itself as a rescue mission.
No.
And so I think that's fair. "1,700 miles in 122 days. 1,700 miles of sand and wind and enemies." Once more, the people of Britain heard their church bells ring. More than 3 years earlier, they had been warned that this would be the signal of invasion. But long since the nightmare of the threat of invasion had passed.
Now the bells rang out a song of thanksgiving, a song of victory.
Now there's the plain and simple truth about Britain. But the fellow that calls the signals on the Axis team knows his only chance of winning is to split our team up. So his team plays a game at which they've had a lot of practice. A game which has conquered half a dozen countries for them. A game called Divide and Conquer. Men like these tell the British we aren't taking the war seriously. They tell the Russians we are letting them down. They tell the British the Russians will sell them out. And they tell us...
It is manifestly ridiculous for the warmonger Roosevelt to tell the American people that they have anything in common with the British. On the contrary, they are different in every respect.
Well, there are differences, that's true. For instance, we drive on the right side of the road. But in Britain, we go for baseball. They have a little number called cricket.
A little number.
Mm-hmm.
Shows a guy going to sleep.
Yeah.
And anyone who ever drank coffee over there knows why there'll always be an England.
Is your coffee all right, sir?
You guys got bad coffee. Okay, that's one of the things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that was one of the things over there. When I went over there, before I went over there, I was just like, this is going to be a tea drinking place. Everybody's going to drink tea, and I'm going to drink tea too. I like tea, so I'm going to drink tea too because I don't care. I like tea. I had one cup of tea the entire time I was there.
Yeah, didn't we?
Yeah. We had one cup of tea the entire time we were there.
We had countless
flat whites.
Flat whites.
Coffee there was amazing.
We had them at least 2 times a day, every day, if not more than that.
Yeah, I was under the impression that it was just going to be straight tea. And like you have these things like that seem so ridiculous. Like when we, like, it made sense. Like, what was the biggest worry you had going over there?
That I wasn't going to like any of the food or coffee.
And how, like, not even about the food. Let's say the food was just terrible. Now hindsight, and we had people that would say, like, you're not going to like the food. They never really went, or if they went back way back when. And, you know, our subscribers just told us about the rations and stuff like that, that there's kind of certain things that go along with it, or they heard from their grandfather who probably was over there, or their grandparents who went over there during this time, and it was probably still a ration type thing, but you're not going to like the food. That was the point of our Camden video. Like, it's not a restaurant. People talk about England like it's a single restaurant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or like they only have one option. Yeah, there you go.
It's like everybody meets at a single lunchroom in the United Kingdom, and they're like, here it is. It's slop. Hope you like it. And it's like, no, I guess if I, it was like, I was like, well, at the very least, they have McDonald's and Taco Bell and stuff if they don't like it. And it's like, no, at the very least, if you don't like that restaurant, go to the other restaurant, because this is a full-out country.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I loved everything
I loved it too, but that was a misconception that we had going over there. Why? Hindsight, it seems completely ignorant and stupid. But it was a misconception we had.
Another glass of hot and half. Blimey, you'd have thought it happened to poor old Bill. And another bloke he...
Poor old
So I
Bill.
went in to sup my dinner, but it's that in buckets and I was getting parched. Lad, that's bad.
Emanuel Tchaikovsky's smaller pianoforte works.
I ain't kidding, Jack. Why the cockamamie sprinkling some schmaltz mixed with celery tonic?
Why do they all mush so much with corn pone in their mouth? You all can't understand a word they say.
Yes, there are differences. But there are a few things that Britain and America do have in common.
Cigarettes.
And these are the important things of life. A little thing called a free representative government. We call it Congress. They call it Parliament. A little thing called freedom of speech.
In the next war, you've not got to go
Speaker's
to it.
Corner. We never went to
Bring the war
Speaker's
for
Corner.
you. And the thing is, if you take it
But we
from
did
me,
see people speaking,
go to Dorchester. Because the trenches are just outside.
Oh, Trifalgar
This
Square.
meeting is called under the auspices of the American Workers' Party, an organization dedicated to organizing in the working class of America.
Freedom of the press. Freedom of
That guy
religion.
sounded like Sling Blade. They're not in the working class
They
in
may not be
America
important to
with
Hitler,
French fried
but all
taters.
these things are the common heritage of John Q. Public and John Britton. 700 years ago, their ancestors fought for the Magna Carta.
No one will we deny or delay, right or justice.
300 years ago, the Petition of Right.
No man shall be compelled to yield any tax without act of Parliament.
These principles came to our own country with the earliest settlers, and from them developed.
Congress shall make no laws respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble.
We may make gags about each other's accents, but we speak the same language of freedom. Even during the American Revolution, when we were at each other's throats, the Earl of Chatham was free to say about us to the British Parliament,
"You cannot but respect their cause and wish to make it your own."
and that is why in the heart of London, alongside his great naval hero, Nelson, John Britton has put George Washington.
Here's another question I have, and this is a weird one, right? So I'm American now. Tiffany's American now. We can trace absolutely zero of our ancestors to the Revolutionary War. We can trace zero of our ancestors to the Civil War. So, like, do we actually, like, when we, like, people say that, like, arguing back and forth about America, like, can I actually say, well, we won the war? Technically, I lost the war.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, I'm here. My family came over here to see what was up after the war.
Mm-hmm.
We withdrew. I agree with everybody else. We withdrew because we had more important things to do. I speak for my family. And we're happy that it worked out for everybody here, and we came to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But can I honestly say I won the war? Because I know where my family was at during that war.
Mm-hmm.
And we were not in Virginia. We were probably closer. I actually have the name written down of where my family was from because so many people kept asking that. I'll find it before the end of the video.
And in Parliament Square, the most sacred spot in the British Commonwealth of Nations, Abraham Lincoln.
Of course, Hitler doesn't like this kind of talk. His job is to sell the British that we are a nation of money grubbers.
They are different in every respect.
And gangsters. While in the next studio, he is selling us the idea that the British are gutless and dopes. But John Q. Public and John Britton are entirely different. These steel workers, Sheffield or Pittsburgh? These children, American or British, they live in lands which share the same hopes, the same ideals, and unlike the poor children of Germany, in lands where the truth is free.
But let's not kid ourselves. Britain is not the United States, and the United States is not Britain. For instance, we don't go in for this kind of thing. They do. But there's no mystery about that. Remember our grandmother's house? It was old-fashioned, out of date.
Wait, who enjoys what?
We don't go in for this kind of thing.
We don't do that.
They do.
They do
But there's
that.
no
That's
mystery
not
about
us.
that.
We're not about wigs.
Remember our grandmother's house? It was old-fashioned, out of date, patched and altered to suit each new generation, and filled with family relics even grandmother couldn't explain. Well, John Britton has been living in his house for a long time. And that's why to us, who live in a modern house that we built ourselves to suit ourselves, John Britton seems slow-moving and cluttered up with ancient traditions. Kings, for instance. The present king rode to his coronation in the same coach, to the same church, for the same ceremony as his ancestors did. But the job he took on is very different from theirs. There have been some changes made. For the British king can no longer make laws or impose taxes or interfere with government. He and his family work as hard as any other citizen, doing the job that the people expect of them. Today, the king is the servant of the people and not its ruler. When an American is arrested and brought to trial, the bailiff calls his case
The people versus John Doe.
But if such a case were called in Britain, it would be
the King versus John Doe.
It means the same thing.
Same thing?
Today, the British king is the symbol of the people. The British are great fans of the fellow in Buckingham Palace. But when they sing God Save the King, they're not worrying about his health. They mean God bless the British people. And the dukes and the earls? But in 1911, the people took away the last remaining power of the lords to block the action of the people's representatives. Dukes and earls don't run the country anymore. Today, there are only two people who do that. John Britton and his wife. Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Public do here and elect their representatives to the House of Commons. And there they fix the taxes and make the laws. And if John wanted to get rid of the lords, his representatives in Commons can at any time vote them out of existence. But John doesn't want to get rid of them. So he confuses us by keeping dukes and lords in a country where unions have long been accepted as an essential part of the democratic system, where the Labor Party, controlled by the unions, is one of the two great political parties, where longshoremen and railroad engineers have been ministers of the Crown, and where for 30 years he has had a system of social security even more extensive than our own. So when you read about Lord Louis Mountbatten or Lord Beaverbrook, former head of aircraft production, don't think they got their jobs because of their titles. They got them because they were the best men for the jobs. Just as Ernest Bevin, formerly a labor leader and now a member of the War Cabinet, Herbert Morrison, who started life as an errand boy and is now Minister of Home Security, got their important jobs because they were the best men for them. With the things on the surface, the unimportant things, they're John Britton and our John Q. Public differ.
No.
You didn't read
But
the
the
sign?
important part of their lives, they're Lord Louis Mountbatten or Lord Beaver. Things on the surface, the unimportant things.
You are in Britain. Drive left.
So that was one thing I seen over there.
That was another thing.
They still got those.
Yeah. Those signs went up at that time, and they're like, oh, the Americans are going to come. There's just no sense of just taking those down.
Yeah. I thought it was really cool that they had those.
That was another thing that I was under the assumption of going there, but I was right. So I'm going to mess up, and I'm probably going to get hit by a car. And that came close a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
So this man's doing God's work, putting these signs up.
They're John Britton and our John Q. Public differ. But the important part of their lives, they run the same way. The democratic way. The free way.
But this gentleman never bothered about the truth. And when John Britton started carrying the war to Germany, he tried a new line.
The warmonger Churchill only wages this war against the German people to save the British Empire.
All right, let's take a look at that one. Here's the British Empire. And here's where the Germans were headed when Britain declared war. Does that look like trying to save the empire? Tackling Germany when it was headed into Poland and toward Russia? The one direction in which there were no British possessions? After Poland fell, Hitler hinted at peace with the British. This was the perfect chance to save the empire. But it wasn't saving the empire that the British were thinking about.
The position of His Majesty's government in respect of any peace offer by Hitler. We are not in any circumstances, prepared to negotiate with him at any time on any subject.
And after Britain had been on the losing end, month after month, it had another chance to save the empire. Even now, Hitler thought John Britain would make a deal. We heard the British answer.
And let's take a look at this British Empire. The freedom we fought for in 1776, Britain has since freely given to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. These are independent nations with their own parliaments, their own laws, even their own money systems, their own tariffs, which often work to Britain's disadvantage, their own armies and navies. Britain couldn't even take them into war if she wanted to. That's a problem they settle for themselves. Each one of the British Commonwealth of Nations declared war on Germany of its own free will.
Of course, no one ever talks about the British Empire today with India. And men of goodwill in Britain, as well as other countries, have been outspoken in their demands for Indian freedom. For no man who believes in democracy can support foreign rule of any people. But there are things that many of us do not know about India. For instance, that India pays no taxes to Britain, either directly or indirectly. That the Indians fix their own tariff laws, frequently to Britain's disadvantage. That of the Viceroy's Executive Council, 11 of the 15 members are Indians. And in the courts, 10 of every 11 judges. Furthermore, that no Indian is ever conscripted for service in the Army and Navy. It was voluntary enlistment that raised the Indian Army from 170,000 at the outbreak of war to 1.25 million today. And on the subject of India, listen to the words of Field Marshal Jan Christian Smuts. He fought against the British 40 years ago, was defeated in his fight, and still became the leader of one of the British Commonwealths of Nations, Prime Minister of South Africa.
India, if she will, can be free in the same way and by the same means as Canada, Australia, and New Zealand are today free sovereign states. Their peoples worked out a constitution for themselves. The same course is open to India, if the peoples of India will agree about the terms of a free constitution. Freedom isn't a thing that can be imposed from without. It can only be created from within.
The Indians have a responsibility to reconcile the differences that exist in the vast Indian population, with its 100 different languages, its dozens of different religions. And on March the 11th, 1942, the British government placed itself on record and promised full self-government to India, if India will work out a constitution that will satisfy its people after the war is over. But during this war, military leaders agree Allied troops are needed in India as an effective bloc by the democratic world to keep the Nazis and Japs from uniting. Further, India provides the bases for United Nations bombers to get at the Japs in Burma. In other parts of the empire, too, democracy stands on guard. If it wasn't for the British at Gibraltar, Malta, Cyprus, Suez, Alexandria, and they're hanging on to them regardless of the cost, and their drive across Libya to Tripoli, there would have been no American landing in North Africa.
There's another tune the Nazis play about the British Empire.
The British are sitting back, letting others fight the war for them.
Oh, we know that tune very well. Britain will fight to the last Australian or Canadian or New Zealander. The truth that thousands of Canadians and Australians and New Zealanders have gallantly fought and gallantly died in Crete, in Greece, in Libya. But there's something the Nazi mouthpiece leaves out, something pretty important. Out of every 10 inhabitants of the British Empire, 1 comes from Britain. But of the casualties suffered so far in this war, 7 out of 10 were born and raised in Britain. 1 of 10 in population, 7 of 10 in casualties. And in the air, of the planes flying with the RAF in Britain, 2 out of 3 are manned by crews from the island. And of the planes on the overseas fronts, the Western Desert in Africa and the rest, 4 out of 5 are manned by boys from Britain. And then there's a little thing called the British Navy. From 1588, when it licked the Spanish Armada, to 1940, when we got moving on a 2-ocean navy, the greatest battle fleet in the world. That, too, is manned almost entirely by men of Britain, the little island in the Atlantic, an island of seafarers. And the British Merchant Navy, still the greatest merchant navy in the world, in spite of all that Hitler can do. Men from every British town and village in the stokeholds of 10,000 ships, on ice-coated decks, in grimy engine rooms, men who have been torpedoed twice, 3 times.
You know, like, going back to what I said earlier about it being, like, talking to young kids and stuff, you know what I mean? Like, it almost as if it's setting up, like, this competition. Like, you're going over there. Not a competition, but it's, like, almost like, because, like, it's brought up football, right? Mm-hmm. And, like, playing sports. And, like, you gotta, like, men who's watching this, and women, really anybody who's been like an athlete or anything like that knows that talk, that idea of like, well, even rather if it's true or not, and I'm not saying this isn't true, but what I'm saying is like during that time, whether it was true or not, like you get at the end of practice and you'd be like dead tired and you'd practice for an hour and a half and the coach would be like, oh, you're tired? You're tired, you've only practiced for an hour and a half. That other team's practicing and they want more. They practice for 2 hours, 3 hours, and when they get done, they're asking their coach for more. You know, it's set up like this competition type idea. So like it's almost like telling, you know, the troops going in there, like, what, listen, they've been fighting, they've died. So when you get over there, you know, there ain't gonna be no excuses. No. This is where you're going. This is what they've already been through. You're not gonna get no pity from them. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be strong, if you're a strong American and we're stronger than them, you got to do better than them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a low key, like almost like hyping them up.
There's one English sailor who's been torpedoed 6 times and still signed on again.
But we never hear about these things because of a curious character who...
You're about to go get shot at. You're about to go watch your friends get ended. Here's a guy who's been torpedoed 6 times and he still wants to sign up. Mm-hmm. What's your excuse? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
His ways will never be completely understandable to an American. John Britton himself. He has an idea he shouldn't talk about himself and what he does. He calls it bad form. We call it damn silly. He'd say of a Spitfire, oh, she's not bad, little kite. But this man, the boss of the German Air Force, can tell us that the Spitfire has been the most deadly fighter in the world. And we certainly need an interpreter when this happens.
Hello, Bob. Had a good trip? Oh, all right.
All right. Except that he spent 2 days in the icy waters of the North Atlantic after being torpedoed on the way to Murmansk.
Stoicism.
Mm-hmm. See this man? His name is Whitten Brown. And this man, believe it or not, is the first man who flew the Atlantic non-stop. In 1919, 8 years before any...
Now, listen what they said, like right there. Even back then, you see it in movies and you see it everything like that. hey, soldier, what type of equipment? This right here is probably one of the best part of American military right here. This is high grade steel, bulletproof. This is one of the best machines that God ever put on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. And they're literally saying, you can brag on your stuff, but they're not gonna.
Yeah.
they're not gonna show. And that's like a good idea, like to say, like, just because they act cool in front of you doesn't mean that they are cool. That goes to that, I hope I'm saying the word right, but that stoicism.
I feel like modesty.
Well, it's a modesty, but it's like, I feel like Americans to an extent are more emotional. You know, Brits had a real suck it up culture.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that for our troops during World War II,
no.
Because they, you know, it became a way of life for them. But talking to people and stuff like that, and you're talking to somebody and you're like, it's good to see sunshine during the war. You know, you got a real positive attitude, not knowing that that person probably lost family in the Blitz, mother, sister, and they're still up doing their job. And like, you can see kind of the things that we talked about during the Blitz video and talked about during the 13 hours, that's still, like, that's even being mentioned here, that like, you're gonna see that. So it's not something that like we've thought of, like this is literally in the British culture to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Just to clarify, I'm not like falling asleep on this. It's very late.
Yeah.
He and John Alcock flew non-stop from Newfoundland to Ireland. But as usual, the British let it go at that, and Whitten Brown went back into obscurity. There's nothing wrong with John Britton that a correspondence course in showmanship wouldn't cure.
For a moment, imagine that you're not American, but British. You'd still be in uniform, for in Britain, every man between the age of 18 and 41, unless he cannot be replaced at a vital workbench, is already in uniform. Your old man, too. He's had to quit guessing about the last war, for they're now starting to draft men up to 51.
Wow.
Wow.
Dependents or no dependents. If you've got yourself into this mess, your draft board will say, frightfully sorry, old chap, but you're in the Army anyway. And your kid sister, if she isn't a sailor, or in the Air Force, or the Land Army, or a ferry pilot, or in the fire brigade, she's probably in the Army. For they've drafted unmarried women up to 30. And even if she's married, every woman up to 41 can be drafted to work in war plants. And it's a real draft. For 8 million workers, men and women, can't quit their jobs or be fired without government permission. Britain is only 20 miles from German guns and German planes. Everybody, man or woman, young or old, is in the front line.
That was amazing. I didn't know that, did you?
No. I mean, you got kind of the idea, like, we had what was here is called the war effort.
Mm-hmm.
You ever see that picture, like, the woman doing the, like, flexing sign? Like, back then, like, that was, like, you know, everybody worked.
Yeah.
It was just called the war effort. But I think not so much in the military, though. You know, that was, that a lot of women was doing phone, or, like, working on ships.
Yeah.
Military type jobs, you know what I mean? Supply type jobs, repair type jobs, but not on the front line shooting anti-aircraft guns.
Yeah.
Anybody have any female family members that was doing that? And would you cross them? Would you ever get out of line with them in front of you? They seen things you couldn't. They see things that, I've seen things that make you crawl. You make your skin crawl. Ain't nothing you could say. Like, could you really affect those people? Yeah, it's amazing.
Maybe this isn't your idea of Britain. The ads were different, and you wondered whether they still made bows and arrows at the village forge. The ads kept quiet about industry, just as this one leaves out the aircraft plants and the oil fields. Well, they have the rich green fields you've read about, the quiet country lanes, but they also have the steel mills of Sheffield,
sardine cans,
the Pittsburgh of Britain. They have the picturesque little villages, the gently flowing streams, the lovely old castles, but they also have the shipyards of the River Clyde, not as modern as Henry Kaiser's, but still one of the greatest in the world. They have the old cathedrals, deathless reminders of a rich tradition. But they also have the great industrial cities of Birmingham, Glasgow, Manchester, Leeds. They seldom, if ever, saw an American tourist, but they made Britain, even in peacetime, one of the greatest industrial powers in the world. And in wartime, even as late as July 1942, this little island, no larger than the state of Idaho, was making more war goods than we were.
Wow.
Maybe you thought John Britain sat there and waited for us to send him planes and guns and tanks. Well, he's deeply grateful for what our Lend-Lease did for him. It saved his skin when he was in a tough spot. But today, Lend-Lease works in more ways than one. For today, John Britain himself furnishes planes and guns and tanks through the same Lend-Lease. To us, to Russia, and his other allies all over the world. In Britain alone, our forces have received, free from the British, 1.5 million tons of food, clothing, and munitions, and 2.5 million tons of other materials. There's another thing you ought to know about Britain. If your unit gets sent there, you probably won't be invited out for supper or for a drink. That's not because the British don't want to entertain you. They haven't anything to entertain you with. Britain is mobilized for war, total war, and that means an end to civilian supplies. If you were a Britisher, you wouldn't expect your girl to use lipstick. There isn't any, except what we bring over as bait. She wouldn't be smartly dressed, for clothes are rationed, severely rationed. It's very unlikely she wears stockings, for if she bought a pair of stockings a month, that would be all the clothes of any kind she could buy. That's some ration.
So this is the first video that I think we've seen that actually mentions all this.
Yeah.
Because you guys have talked about it a lot, about the rations and stuff like that, and this is partly this video we're watching. They say this is where the stereotype of bad food came from, was because of the rationing and all that, but not so much the food. And you know, you're not going to be invited over because, you know, nobody has anything to feed you. And I think this is like, maybe it was mentioned more in a British way. Mm-hmm. And this is mentioned more into a American way that we're like, oh, okay. I don't know, you're getting like a different idea from this. And another question
like you assumed it'd be really bad, but just
this is gonna be
how bad?
This is going to be a weird question, right? So we have an American video that's saying that Britain was actually supplying their allies, including us, with, it inferred tanks and ammunition and possibly rations and stuff. But after the war, England was in debt to America for a long time. So what was we in debt to if we was getting a lot of our ammunition and stuff from them?
We think our gas rationing is tough, but John Britain gets no gas at all. He goes to a pub to buy a bottle of whiskey. The pub keeper laughs in his face. Grain is needed for industrial alcohol. Industrial alcohol is needed for munitions. And nearly all the reserve stock of British whiskey is kept for sale to America to pay for the goods Britain buys here. For don't forget, besides Lend-Lease, Britain buys and pays for vast quantities of goods. And it was the cash purchases that Britain made before we entered the war that gave our munitions industry its start and enabled us to build it up in record time. He goes to buy a pack of cigarettes. There probably aren't any. But if there are,
2 shillings, please.
that's 40 cents for a pack of cigarettes. 12 cents represent the cost of the cigarettes. The other 28, the tax paid to the government. For Britain is going all out in taxation. Nobody is making any money out of this war. Industry is paying. Excess profits tax is 100%. Labor is paying. The man who earns $33 a week pays 29% income tax. And the rich man, if there are any of them left, pays an income tax of no less than 97.5%. And then there's the little matter of food. There are not many fat men in England nowadays, but John Britton isn't kicking. He knows 1 egg a week is helping him to win the war. The British rations are the rations of a free people. They could get food as they did in peacetime from Canada, Australia. But that would take ships, and the British prefer to use the ships for supplies to Russia, planes from America, troops to the Mediterranean.
So the other videos seem to really push out like the brave actions of the, what they called it, when it talked about sacrifice, you know, it really talked in more of like mortality.
Yeah.
This is the first video that we've actually seen that's like, it's talking about how people sacrifice in their daily lives as more of like material possessions and money.
Like, you know, everyone was affected, but you didn't know that there was no food and no cigarettes, no alcohol.
Yeah, layers.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can say ration, and ration's a base word.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it was like a food line and everybody got flour and stuff, but I didn't know the low income was paying 30% and the wealthier ones was paying 97% to support the war effort. That's completely brand new information to me.
Mm-hmm. It seems unimaginable to live like that.
Or the idea that they had the option to get more food from Canada or from one of their neighboring countries, but they'd rather spend it on the resources of war. So that's weird. That's a different side that we've yet to see.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few different things like that. Like you're talking about the woman not wearing lipstick.
Yeah.
You know, that's saying a lot. Like beauty or fashion at that point in time to the average British citizen, which I would say the need to carry on, you know, not saying it like in a bad way, but if you go to prison, you know, female prison, they still find ways to make makeup and stuff like that. And that would actually be an interesting kind of thing. If anybody has stories like how it was there, did women do something, find alternatives?
Mm-hmm.
Was there styles and stuff? Was there things like, was there like little tips or something like that of like, okay, we don't have lipstick, but we do have.
Yeah, and then it just spreads and like that's like, okay,
that's like the
everyone's doing this now.
Yeah, because that's the thing, like the human nature is to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mediterranean. To win the war, every Britisher is on short rations and has been on short rations for 2 years. Everybody except the children. They get 4 times the eggs that grown-ups do. They get all the oranges that arrive in Britain. And practically all of the extra milk. For John Britton is thinking of after the war. Of the new world that his children and ours will inherit. A world where there will not only be freedom of speech and freedom of worship, but also freedom from want and freedom from fear.
It is not given to us to peer into the mysteries of the future. Still I avow my hope and faith, sure and inviolate, that in the days to come, the British and American peoples will, for their own safety and for the good of all, work together in majesty, in justice and in peace.
This is what the British are fighting for. They are an old people, a stubborn people, and sometimes they have moved slowly. But in 3 years of blood and sweat and tears, John Britton has found his soul. Now he is tough. Now he is determined, and now he knows where he is marching, to victory and to a new world. He's a good man to have on our team.
So that was a completely, I don't know, different way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
It was back to the outside looking in with more information. I'd like to know what our troops thought of that.
Yeah.
Like what type of feelings did that invoke? Like I see like a lot of I wonder if they got up and was like, man, these are like extremely tough people. Like, you know, the American government, even back then, they was trying to set something. It was very interesting how they went back and forth between situation to culture.
Yeah.
I think the idea is like how they said that is like, it's not that different. And I think that that's something that an American suffers with, is the idea that we think everything that's not us is extremely different.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you agree?
Well, personally, the way I felt after being there was like America's big and has a lot of states.
Yeah.
And every state that you go to is pretty much different.
Yeah.
The accents, the way people dress.
It'd be like going to a
food.
different country. Yeah.
Everything is different state by state. And I prefer some states a lot more over others. And I say to you all the time, I wish it wasn't that far away. Because to me, it honestly felt like going just to a different state. Like it didn't feel like I'm in another country. It felt like I'm in a different state and I like this state. If it was closer, I'd live there. If it was closer, I'd be there, multiple times a month.
I think another thing, like one of the things that we had, and I don't think this was just like for England. I think this is just a natural American thing to do, is like when you go to another country, everybody's like, be careful. Be careful, that's not America. Mm-hmm. You get robbed, you get mugged, and me and her the first couple of days, and I think I mentioned in the videos, like this is like the second day or third day, and we're starting to get comfortable and starting to understand the United Kingdom a little bit more. There's dangers everywhere.
Yeah.
No matter where you go. Not in the UK, just in life in general. But to be fair with you, everybody was asked, did you feel safe? And I told everybody that I talked to, I said, if Tiffany and her friends or her cousins or whatever said that they wanted to go on a girls' trip for the weekend, I would feel more comfortable with them in London than I would in Orlando. Mm-hmm. And Orlando's right up the road. I felt like it was safer.
I did too.
I felt like, I don't feel like it was safe. Don't take my words and twist them. I felt like it was safer. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I do believe that there is a certain safeness everywhere you go. That doesn't mean I think that if you come here and go to Orlando, you're going to get mugged and beaten or anything like that. I believe Orlando is safe. There's certain situations you can find yourself in Orlando, and there are certain places that you don't want to find yourself in Orlando. And I would assume it's the exact same in London. Mm-hmm. And I would assume it's the exact same in most of the cities and towns in the UK. I'm sure Glasgow is, Glasgow and Edinburgh are beautiful cities, and for the most part, very safe. But I'm sure there's some places in those areas that if you went, you would regret going. That being said, I feel like London, even though it was a much larger city, majority of the time that they was worried is like, it's dangerous out here. What do you mean it's dangerous? You can get pickpocketed.
Yeah, that's the main thing we heard about was pickpocketing, and
that's not the main thing we worry about in Orlando.
No,
it's not the main thing.
No, not at all.
But overall, I think that was a really amazing video and a good look. You know, because we've been looking through the British, but from the outside looking in. But it raised a few questions. It raised a few ideas, like how long have you lived in the sardine can?
Yeah.
Do you always refer to yourself as living in a sardine can? Like he really drove that into the ground. But no, the taxes being brought up was pretty amazing. Showing the women work, because the last couple of videos we seen, and I don't know if that was set up for this show or not, it showed women in the war effort, and I assumed, like, you know, they was at the, when they was charting the planes and stuff, like on the Battle of Britain.
Yeah.
I watched the movie, Battle of Britain, and it was showing women in that, and showing women, you know, actively in the, but I've never seen a woman operate an anti-aircraft gun. So that was pretty amazing. Guys, that one was just because you guys wanted us to watch it. If there's something else you want to watch, we got more videos coming out. We got another vlog coming out probably in the next couple of days of us going to doing more stuff in England. So it's another actual vlog. If you're watching this after we put it out, go watch it.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everybody for watching. Like and subscribe.
And don't forget to check out our shirts or our merch.
Merch. Check out our merch.
I don't like that word.
I don't like the word merch either.
No,
I
merchandise.
know a lot of people have been buying the coffee cups and stuff.
Yeah.
The shirts, not this shirt. Like, this is our shirt. We also have other shirts that says, it's because I'm British in it. And basically how he was describing all of you guys, minus the sardine can thing that he just wouldn't let go.
Yeah.
That's Stoicism and stuff. Why are you like that? It's because I'm British in it. That's kind of the purpose of the shirt. And
yeah.
People's been buying that like crazy. Yeah, so if you want a little patriotism, you're proud to be British, check it out. We'll put the link below. I'm Rich.
And I'm Tiffany.
And that was Know Your Ally.